All right, hi everybody. This is an exciting day. This is the patch 10.12 mid-set expansion PBE rundown. I am Riot Mort, lead designer of TFT, and with me today is
Riot Wittrock, the set design lead for this mid-season expansion to Galaxies.
yeah. So our goal with this was we wanted to try something different, where we're going to have sets be a little longer, 6 months instead of the usual 4.5. But we wanted to kind of break it up with sort of a mid-set, like big sort of pace of change. So Whitty, why don't you talk about some of the goals you had with that?
Yep, so this is going to be one of our actually our largest content change within a set. We really want to reinvigorate the set, kind of do something similar to what a full set would do, just on a smaller scale, which is introduce a lot of exciting new content that encourages new builds, new ways to play beyond those sort of smaller 2-week changes. So really just inject some freshness and reinvigorate the game partway through.
Nice. Okay, so first off, we have to talk about what we're taking out. Because when we're adding this much stuff, some stuff had to go. So with that, here are the 9 champions we're going to be taking out. So first off, let's talk about Void. Kha'Zix, Cho'Gath, and Vel'Koz all leaving.
Yeah, Void's out. You know, it's been sometimes the staple of builds throughout the season, but we kind of saw an opportunity to kind of extract this from the set, make room for new content. You know, we need to remove some champions because we want, you know, still to see those 3 stars, to see those kind of epic moments. So Void was the first one kind of off the table.
I'll be happy with Void gone because it means there's no way to just ignore everyone's defenses. Like, defenses will always matter to some extent, so that's pretty cool to see. Okay, next up is the Valkyries. Now, I'll be honest, this one hurts a little because Kayle is my favorite champion of the set. I think we did a good job. And I think each of the 3 Valkyries had their chance to shine. Kai'Sa was really big in the Mech comp, Kayle is Kayle, and Miss Fortune's ult was just massive damage, so...
Yeah, I mean, I'll mention this here, which is a lot of the changes and what we needed to remove kind of comes down to practicality and leaving room for that freshness. So none of these are really that we thought, you know, their designs were horrible or we were removing the worst parts of the set. A lot of it did come down to what made sense to remove to make the most room for new. So, you know, this is the kind of both trait bonus and champions on their spells that I'd be very excited to revisit in the future with other expansions or other sets. So.
Yeah, I'll be looking for that opportunity to reprint Kayle for sure.
Kayle again, Miss Fortune, you know, despite her troubles in launch, had a great showing in this set. So we've started to show now that we've done 3 sets, we can revisit things in new and better contexts. Yep. and make them shine like they should.
Yep. And then lastly, we have Sona, Lux, and Kassadin leaving.
Yep, all of these kind of individually were places where things needed to move in order to make room for the new. Kassadin, I was really kind of excited after his, slow start, I guess, in the set, how much players attached to him, and excited to revisit his spell in the future. Sona, a little bit more mixed. I think we'd want to do a little work on the details if we ever brought back that kind of more spammy AoE healing plus cleanse profile there.
Yeah, I think Sona, for me, the biggest miss was that she was most famous for her use with an item rather than her spell, so...
Yep, and then Lux. Lux, again, I think is a pretty interesting spell. Lux is a more utility and crowd control focused unit I'd be excited to see, but kind of the bloat of Darkstar and Sorcerers kind of just meant that she was a good opportunity to remove.
Cool. So, with those 9 champions leaving, let's talk about the new champions. First up, we have Zed, the Rebel Infiltrator.
Yes, oh, I'm so excited for players to get their hands on Zed. Zed kind of offers 2 roles. When not the focus of your composition, he's a strong utility unit. He steals away a % of the enemy's attack damage. and you know, get that positioning game, try to get him against a more attack damage focused target. But this guy can definitely operate as a carry. You get him to 2 stars or especially 3 stars, and you're seeing a powerful infiltrator, kind of pure auto attack profile that out of our infiltrators we've had a lot more big spells than big auto attackers, and he fills that role real nicely.
Yeah, I'm also excited for him as a rebel because it means you can group him up even as the center of your rebel cluster, and he'll jump out of it and allow you to spread out a bit more. So that's a pretty cool thing to see.
Yep.
All right, next up we have Vayne, the cybernetic sniper.
Yes, Vayne's another one that I'm excited for. Vayne she enters a transformational state where she's every 3rd auto attack, tumbling, stealthing, and getting a more powerful hit. There's some remnants of sort of Lucian's kiting pattern in there, but with a more powerful, chunky version that's less focused on Seraph's Embrace and more allowing you to itemize her with things like Bloodthirster or even just pure offense, and she kind of peels for herself things like Rage Blade or, you know, Infinity Edge, Last Whisper. I'm really excited to see Vayne as a carry, one of those 3-cost carries in action.
Yeah, I think she does a couple things. First off, she makes cybernetic not need echo to get the 6-piece, which is really flexible. The second thing is, yeah, because she does the tumble, which drops aggro, you don't have to put a defensive item on her, which means she can be that 3 item carry. And third, she's a 3-cost carry, which I know a lot of people have felt that like the set is lacking, so that's cool to see.
Yep.
All right, next up, Riven. She is a Chrono Blade Master 4-cost.
So Riven's gonna be a fun one. First, I'm very excited to see players get their hands on this spell. I think we've captured kind of the essence of Riven, this very high motion, high melee damage threat, and I mean, she's a carry. She's a definitive 4-cost carry. She also holds some of the burden with Kale leaving on having those Blade Master comps or those Chrono comps have a little bit more flexibility with things like AP items or mana items, but another one that's exciting. She's one that focuses a bit less on her traits as well. She's a kind of that mixed profile of cares more about using her attack speed to enable her spell rather than that being her focus. But I think she's very fun, and I'm looking forward to see what players do with her.
Yeah, there's a bunch of things to highlight here. The itemization that she's mostly an AP carry as opposed to an AD carry. She only has 25 mana, which means, interestingly enough, she can be a Ludens user of all things. And then, yeah, just like the way she scales with AP, there's even Sorcerer Riven comps we've seen that can do some really well. So yeah, so those are the 3 champions that are in existing traits. Now let's talk about some new traits. So first up is our big 6-piece Battlecast. Battlecast says, upon dealing or taking 10 instances of damage, heal if below half health, or deal magic damage to the nearest enemy if above half. So what do you tell us about that?
So first, this one's a little complicated. We wanted to continue to experiment with, you know, Galaxies had a lot of those simpler traits, and this one's a little more on the complicated side. There's a little bit more play to it. But you can think about it really simply as you're taking and dealing damage, every now and again you're either going to get a blast of damage or a bit of healing. And so you're building around how do you have units that both care about both halves of that effect and have ways to have you know, the way the combat plays out or the way you're investing in items be involved. All of these units have different ways that they have exciting ways that they interact with this effect. We'll get into that a little bit as we go into their spells, but hopefully this is something that is got, you know, usefulness at all of its stages. It's a flat number, so the 2-piece is very powerful early game. As a 4-piece, it's a very ways that you can have four blaster, for Battlecast, for Brawler, and for Sorcerer, for Battlecast. There's a lot of mixing and matching you can do here with the 4-piece, or you can just go for the 6. Have the full effect, have it be the focus of your team. That should be exciting.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how people use the items to get those 10 instances of damage as quickly as possible. So, all right, so with each champion, let's talk about them. First off, we have Alawi, the 1-cost Battlecast Brawler.
Yep. So Alawi, again, she's at her core a frontliner. She does a damage in an area. She's going to steal armor and magic resist from enemies that she hits. This should be a pretty bread and butter defensive unit with a little bit of decision making of, do you have ways that she can benefit with battle cast that makes her better than Malphite? Is she something that you leave in the later game if they have a really, tanky Vanguard frontline that you want to add a little bit of, shred to? But you're pretty straightforward frontline style as a one cost.
Yeah, in our testing so far, she's actually been a surprising amount of damage. So if you're looking for a more aggressive Malphite, Alawi's a great choice.
Yeah.
All right, next up we have Nocturne, the one-cost Battlecast Infiltrator.
Yep, so, in a lot of ways for infiltrators, this will be replacing Kha'Zix as a one cost here. He's got that fear, which leaves a unit stunned in an area, does damage to them over time, but the focus is very much so on his utility. Nocturne is about having, with good positioning, taking out one of those key backline units, not through damage, but through crowd control. So you have some options. Are you putting him with the rest of your infiltrators to try to super burst down one unit, or do you let your Zeds or your Shakos take out the priority carry while this Nocturne is holding down a unit? He's less dependent on items because of his utility, and I think he'll be a lot of fun.
Yep, we've seen some good stuff with him. I think there'll be some people that will see the skin and think, oh, where's my Blender Nocturne? But not quite getting that here, but still some other cool things you can do with him. All right, next up we have Kog'Maw, 2-cost Battlecast Blaster.
This guy is a carry. There's synergies all the way down from the way he interacts with Blaster with a strong attack speed ability, the way that he interacts with Battlecast, being able to just get a lot of instances of damage. He's not a super long-range unit, though. He has a little bit of vulnerability unless he's in his casting state, in which case he'll have that infinite range and not be moving around during his spell. He's also kind of a on-off, on-off. It's a very inexpensive spell, relatively speaking. It doesn't require all this big build-up to get there like a lot of other spells, but he'll have some downtime. There'll be some times where he's a little bit more vulnerable. I expect him to be another carry option in Blaster, another carry option in the 2-cost slot. I expect to see a lot of this guy at 3-star as well, so it should be fun.
Yeah, Kog'Maw's one that we're going to be looking at PBE for a lot of tuning. For example, his mana cost was 30 at one point. It's 60 right now. So we'll see where he lands, but definitely, as Woody said, looking to be an exciting carry here. Okay, next up. Oh, this is probably one of my favorites. Cassiopeia, Battlecast Mystic, 3-cost.
Yes, there's a lot of interesting things going on here, but if you've ever wanted to live that fantasy with a TFT champion of just causing the entire enemy team to be slowly damage over time killed, Cassiopeia is going to be the champion for you. I'll highlight a few quick things here because there's a lot of details going on. She is one of the most damage focused mystics we had. Obviously, we had Master Yi in elements, but she's only got those two traits, and they're both relatively focused on kind of more defense, but the spell is mostly damage. She also adds an aspect that we've been looking at for the game for a while, which is somewhat of an outlet to shielding. While the unit is poisoned by her noxious blast, they're gonna have their incoming shields be cut in half. So I'm excited to see her as basically being a lot of flexible options. Sometimes she's going to be the carry in your composition. You're going to 3-star. You're going to put on Seraphs and Gunblade. Sometimes she's going to be your utility champion, suppressing those shields, adding a little bit of damage, softening them up for your Kog'Maw. So excited to see her in action.
Yeah, this has been my favorite champion in playtest for sure. A single Seraphs means she starts poisoning the entire team, as Woody pointed out, with only 25 mana. Synergizes well with Morello, synergizes well with Gunblade because she's doing a metric fuck ton of damage. This is a really exciting champ. I'm really happy to see how this one goes.
Yep, and I think a good introduction for a Cassiopeia fantasy for TFT as well.
Yeah. All right, next up we have Victor, the Battlecast Sorcerer 4-cost.
Yes, Victor making his premiere in TFT as well. This is a big caster in the line of 4-cost sorcerers that we've had. He does a lot of damage, and there's two details I'll quickly point out here. With Misfortune leaving with her % max health damage, Victor picks up a little bit of that burden. The first half of his damage profile doing that extra percent health max health damage, kind of chewing through those brawlers there. He's also got a little bit of a different targeting strategy. He's gonna try to draw that death laser between the two enemies on the opposing side that are the furthest away from each other. So kind of something to think about for opponents if they want to try to play around Victor. It's a little bit different than the standard spread out as far as possible game. So, but looking for him to really just be that big sorcerer carry and burn through teams.
Yeah, we've seen in our playtest that when Victor casts, your team can explode. This is a lot of damage, especially if you stack him with items. So definitely the scary 4-cost sorcerer carry.
Yep.
All right, now last battle cast. This is an interesting one. Urgot, the 5-cost Battlecast Protector. Witty, what does Urgot do?
Urgot is no joke. I'll talk about his traits a little bit first, because we've been talking a lot more about what makes a good 5-cost in TFT, and we want things that are important for their synergies, but not super dependent on them always. So I expect to see some ways that a Protector comp uses Urgot as their carry, or a Battlecast comp uses Urgot, but I expect him to also show up in some other contexts as well, and that's because his spell is so unique. Urgot is the single target destroyer. Urgot is going to get that drill into a unit, and they are going to die. So your focus is, how many times can I get Urgot to cast? How do I get him into that chain casting state? How do I protect him, because he's got this long cast? He really has to reel him in and grind him up. So I expect to see a lot of Urgot in different ways, and some exciting stuff there.
Yeah, there's a couple things I want to highlight here with Urgot. First off, as Witty said, when Urgot hits somebody with their spell, they will die. It doesn't matter if they are a 3-star Poppy with Bramble Vest, Dragon Claw, you name it, they will die. This thing eats things up. So if they're running 6 units, Urgot is a really good counter you should consider in any comp. The other thing I want to highlight here is the spell reduces the mana each time it casts, and this scales with AP. So for example, if you have a 2-star Urgot, its max mana is 80. After it casts, its max mana is now 60, then 40, then 20. And if you can keep Urgot alive long enough, he will just start chain eating people, which is really awesome to see. And the last thing I want to highlight here is that it says the furthest enemy in his attack range. You know what increases his attack range? RFC. So there's a lot of really cool item combinations with Urgot. RFC, Gunblade's another cool one. So looking to see what kind of itemization people come up with for Urgot.
Oh yeah, very exciting.
All right, that's it for Battlecast. Let's move on to the weirder of the two, Astro. Astro says, for a 3-piece bonus, there's only 4 champions, Astro champions have 30 reduced mana cost.
Yep. So this is about as simple as you get from a trait. Hopefully the interest of the spells really shine through on the individual champions. But we wanted to keep the bonus simple, because there's some really appealing champions in there, and we want you to be able to use Astro more freely.
Yep. Cool. So let's dive into these champions. First up, we have Nautilus, 2-cost Astro Vanguard.
Yes, so we have lots of Vanguards in TFT now. This brings in our 6th Vanguard, actually. And, you know, Vanguards are known for their tankiness, right? And, you know, you got big shields with Poppy and Mordekaiser. You got kind of just ways to CC the team a little bit with Wukong. But if you're looking to lock down that important frontliner, Nautilus is the guy for you. He's got a long-lasting stun. It's very easy for him to get that initial cast, at least. And so lining this up against their carry Xin Zhao or their Gangplank that really needs to get that cast off is going to be very valuable for your frontline, and causing some survivability, not through his own personal tankiness, but preventing that damage output from the enemy team's melee units.
Yeah, the big thing to note here, too, is there's a really cool positioning game because, well, it does stun the first thing it hits for that 3.5 seconds. It stuns everything around that thing as well, so if everyone's too tightly grouped up, you can get a big stun for a 2-cost here, so quite value.
some give and take there too. The more they spread out, the more you might be able to get your Nautilus to target a very specific enemy if you're kind of scouting and playing that sort of Zephyr type game. So excited to see both the positioning and just the big CC out of this guy.
Yep. Okay, Witty. Next up, let's talk about the headache you've caused me. You ready? Let's talk about Bard. 3 costs Astro Mystic. What does Bard do, Witty?
So I'll describe what Bard does, just so it's very clear. I'm sure we're looking at the slide here.
Yep.
First has a passive. This is his auto attacks just generate more mana. It scales with AP as well, so there's just a few more item options on him, and this is the reason you star this guy up, is so that he can cast his spell more. Then his spell, it reads pretty simply. Bard is going to summon a Meep onto your bench that you can sell for 1 experience. Now let's be super clear what this champion does. Bard, you don't put him in your composition to win fights. He's not gonna help you do damage to the enemy team or heal anyone or stun them or anything like that. Bard is a long-term investment, someone that you consider if you get him really early and you think you can sustain the loss of combat power. Maybe someone you put in kind of similar to launch set pirates, where you're on a loss streak but you want to kind of still get some profit out of that. So this is your way to make a long-term investment, do those weird Bard things, get those meeps, get that extra experience, and invest in the long term. Get him out of your composition at level 8, probably, definitely a level 9, because he's not doing very much for you, and find your own unique path to using Bard.
Yep. Yeah, this will be interesting to see how people use this to level up quicker. I won't spoil some of the cool combos we've found so far. But I will say is it's very interesting, and unlike before when we used to test like getting XP, you can sell these when you want. So if you want to stay low level and then sell it all at once, you can do that. If you want to accelerate your leveling as quickly as possible, you can do that. So Bard is definitely the most unique champion, I think, this set for sure.
Yeah, I expect to see some really fun kind of, we've been calling them the ball of meeps on people's bench. And we're excited to see, you know, how much interest is there from players on having this sort of more strategic, non-combat game. We've played with it in the trait system before, and now we're playing with it on a champion. So excited to hear folks' thoughts there.
Nice. All right, let's move on to a classic. We have Gnar, the 4-cost Astro Brawler.
Yeah, Gnar's coming back, and when we looked at Gnar, we looked at some other options for abilities, but honestly, he was really fun in launch, turning into Mega Gnar, getting a bunch of health, bunch of attack damage, and just being a big swing moment for the team. Similar to launch, he is a little expensive on his cast. You probably got to put some defensive items on him, or maybe a little extra mana with your Frozen Heart, whatever you're gonna do to get his spell going. The earlier he casts in a fight too, the more reliable he's going to be. But he's your swing moment, and someone that you can try to have maybe you position him as a little more of a carry in your brawler comp because he's got that persistent AD, or just as a good extra frontliner for Astro or whatever else you're doing.
Yeah, you can get some crazy stuff too going if you have 3 Astro, reducing the mana by 30, then maybe do like a Frozen Heart and another tier item. You can get him casting pretty early, and his cast is big. It still does the knockback, it still does the CC and the stun. So yeah, hopefully people are excited to see Gnar back.
Oh yeah.
All right, and lastly, finally added to TFT, we have the 4-cost Teemo Astro Sniper.
Yes. So I'm excited for Teemo. Finally, he's in TFT, and this time with Teemo, we wanted to give him his first opportunity to be a carry, and so Teemo is the core of your damage composition if you're going to invest in him. He focuses around his mushrooms as the source of his carry, with being able to supplement basically his damage output with both Astro and Sniper. He's gonna be sitting there. He's gonna be launching 3 mushrooms at a time. They're gonna sometimes be hitting units directly and exploding. Sometimes they're gonna be kind of waiting for that little delayed detonation, but hopefully you're getting good, consistent damage out of him. We haven't actually had this really explicitly on a champion before, but he also slows enemies. So if a melee unit gets hit by one of these and lives and is trying to walk towards Teemo, you know, closed up sniper, they're gonna be moving slow, and you're gonna feel their pain. Hopefully, true Teemo style. So I'm excited for Teemo.
Yeah, this is another case where, again, if you take Astro, that lowers his mana down to 50. Throw on a Ceres, you're looking at 30, and then maybe like an IE Jeweled Gauntlet, and these shrooms hurt a lot and are being cast like crazy. So really living that Teemo fantasy of throwing those satellites everywhere and watching the explosions. So should be a fun AP carry. All right, our last trait is another one-off trait, kind of like Starship. This is Paragon. Ally Star Guardian basic attacks are converted to true damage. All other ally basic attacks are converted to magic damage.
Yep. So we'll Paragon as a one-piece trait. We'll obviously have to talk about the Paragon in detail, but we'll talk about the trait for just a second. This is a choice. You know, this is one of the first traits. If you're in Star Guardian, you're looking pretty good. You're converting to that true damage. Maybe you're a little bit more excited by those, you know, BF swords and bows you've been getting all game when you wanted to just play Star Guardian. But if you're gonna put, you know, the Paragon into your non-Star Guardian, you better be paying a little bit of extra attention. You know, do you need to pierce through that Vanguard front line? Are they playing Brawlers? Are they playing Mystics, where you might have a little more trouble with this effect? So some more decision making coming out of 5 cost rather than just slam them into your composition.
Yeah, we've seen this be really good at getting through those Vanguard lines, so definitely be interested to see how people use it. So now let's talk about Janna, who is a 5-cost Star Guardian Paragon.
Yep, so Janna is the Star Guardian Paragon. 5 cost, or one of our 2 5 costs with Urgot in the expansion. Janna is a big CC output. She's going to be tossing those tornadoes, getting not quite as strong of a CC as Lulu, but still pretty important. But she's got an important second half to her spell, where as the tornadoes travel through your allies, they're getting a large amount of attack speed. So again, another way to kind of supplement basic attacking teams, something that has a bit more positioning interest. This has some of the remnants of what Nami was doing in Elements with her kind of extra magic damage effect. So excited to see Janna in a large variety of compositions. I think she'll show up in a lot of different ways, and you'll have to figure out how to fit her into your composition if it's the right game for Janna.
Yep. So sweet. So that is all the new champions and traits, but obviously with these, there had to be a lot of changes to the various balance, various traits, items, champions, things like that, as well as this is a really good time for us to kind of clean up some things that we think we can improve on. So let's dive into that, and Witty, feel free to supplement me as I go here.
Jump in.
All right, so first off, we have trait changes to balance. I'm going to go over 5 pretty simple ones here. First off, Brawler 4 gets a small nerf, and this is simply because there are now 5 Brawlers instead of 4, so it's easier to put together, and so it pays a little bit of a penalty there. Next up is Celestial. With the removal of Kassadin, there are now only 5 Celestial champions. So that means Celestial 6 is chromatic, and so Celestial 4 and 6 are harder to put together, so they get a buff. Celestial 4 goes from 35 to 40, but Celestial 6 goes from 60 to 99. So Celestial 6 should be something good there. Next up, Witty, there are 8 Chrono comps now, so we have Chrono 8. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, this should be, this is a vertical. I mean, this is you gotta get very specific units to pull this off. Obviously requires a 5 cost in Thresh. You know, attack speed has mixed benefit on a lot of these champions as well, but we're looking to pay you off. You're getting that attack speed fast and often, and if you have the ability to slow down a fight, that's what I really want to see. I think out of players as they mess around with Chrono 8 is get a really defensive option, because your offensive needs are covered with this amount of attack speed. So excited to see what players do.
Yeah, every 0.75 seconds. Pretty crazy.
Yep.
All right, next up is Cybernetic. Cybernetic is kind of weird here. You'll see that the health of the 6-piece has been nerfed, and this is because now with Vayne, you don't need Echo, so it's much easier to hit the 6-piece. But we're also buffing the AD of both the 3 and 6. This is something a little experimental. We haven't really been happy with the offensive power of Cybernetic, so we're actually desyncing those values, and you'll see a bit more AD on Cybernetic. This will probably change a bit on PBE, but this is something we want to try out. And then lastly for this slide, we have Infiltrator, which gets a very small nerf at 2 and 4, just because they've been a little bit much free attack speed at 2-piece especially. So, all right, next slide. We have Mystic. Mystic 2 gets a small buff, trying to make Mystic 2 a little bit more of an enticing splash. Okay, Witty, let's talk about Protector a bit, because Protector is one that I think kind of started pretty strong in Stage 1 and then fell off. And so here we have a buff that just says it goes from 25, 30, 40 to 30, 40, 60. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we're trying to both reinvigorate some of the power in Protector, right? Kind of those core roll at level 5 and 6 for your Protectors has changed in shape, and we're gonna have some different sort of options here with Urgot. You know, he's a 5-cost Protector. That's very different than the way that players have played with Protector previously, but he's pretty good with that effect. You know, if you're chain casting, what do you want to do with Urgot? You want to keep him alive. So excited to see a buff here and see how Protector plays a little differently, a little easier to get that 6-2. You only need one of those spatulas, so it should be good.
Yeah, we're going to keep a really close eye on this too, because with Cassiopeia as well, if we feel like Protectors are kind of being hard countered, we'll have to keep an eye on that. But definitely something, Protectors are one of the ones we've got our eyes on really closely here. Next up is Sniper. Sniper 2 gets a nerf because there are now 4 snipers? Five snipers now. So it's very easy to hit the 2-piece, and so it gets a nerf. But we've added Sniper 4. Witty, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, shift your head a little bit about the way you've been thinking about Sniper as kind of this little supplemental bonus you throw in. This is now this is a big trait. This has 5 units in it as a 2-4 piece. You should be thinking about this a bit more like your blasters, right? Something that's going to be a core half of your composition paired with a front line. So this is now just a way to have a strong back line across the board and supplement your damage.
Yeah, and I want to stress how strong it is, because this is 20% extra bonus per hex, which means if they're sniping from 5 hexes away, that is double damage. Yep. That is a strong trait. All right, next up, Sorcerer. With Lulu getting removed, there is no 8 Sorcerer, and so 4 and 6 get a small buff to compensate for how difficult they are to hit now. And finally, Vanguard. We've added Vanguard 6, which is 750 bonus armor. TLDR, if you're running Vanguard 6, you are tanky against physical damage. And Vanguard 4 gets a small buff. Now, I'm going to call it right now, Vanguard 6 is probably not a win condition. Don't be expecting it to dominate games.
We'll be interested in Vanguard 6. I mean, this has some remnants of Warden, which wasn't, you know, as at least a tall trait, something that a lot of folks built in Elements. You know, this... Frankly, 6 Vanguards is there to give you a lot of options, and now there's, you know, some more carries than there were in Elements, so see if you can get your 6 Vanguard Jace to kill their whole team. I'm excited to see it.
I could see a 6 Vanguard 2 Mystic with Cassiopeia as well as a possibility.
Yeah.
So, okay, now there's a couple other traits we're changing here, but these ones are a bit bigger, so I wanted to give them their own separate slide. First up, we have Darkstar. Darkstar is going from a 3/6/9 to a 2/4/6/8. Keep in mind, Lux is no longer here, so there are only 6 Darkstar champions, which means 8 is very hard to do. In addition, the number goes from 20, 25, 30 to 12, 25, 35, 60. If you hit 8 Darkstar, this thing is insane. But there's also 2 Darkstar, which is flexible. And then finally, the biggest change, and this is really big, we'll be keeping a close eye on this, is it used to be whenever a Darkstar champion died. So if you were running 3 Darkstar, the most stacks of the buff you could get was 2. Now it's whenever any ally dies, which means if you're running 2 Darkstar in an 8-person comp, you can get up to 7 stacks of your buff.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite changes in the patch, I think. The peek behind the curtain is we continue to be excited by these patterns, either on items or champions or traits, like Darkstar, like Light from Elements, that kind of backload the fight a little bit. The drama builds as the combat goes on. But Darkstar was so insular to its own effect. All you wanted to do when you were playing this was play more Darkstars, and that can be fun for a game or two, but it gets a little boring. So we want that same type of effect, but with more flexibility flexibility in the units that you're building. So you can declare your carries more specifically. You can play that 2 and 4 piece as options as well. Some more divided up breakpoints, but still have a powerful composition and get that Jin, get that Xerath to be your primary carries.
Yep. Okay, next up is Star Guardian. So first off, now that there are 7 Star Guardians and spatulas, we can add 9 Star Guardians. So there is now a 9 Star Guardian. Good luck chasing it. Should be hilarious. The second one is something, unfortunately, we have to talk about a bit here, is that we shipped Star Guardian with a pretty bad bug that was found by one of our Chinese players, a streamer named Tu, so thank you, Tu. It turns out this has been live since day 1, and will now be getting fixed. But this bug was that when you first cast your spell as a Star Guardian, you would trigger the Star Guardian buff, giving them their mana back. When you cast the spell a second time, the mana was being cut in half. And so what would happen is the Star Guardian trait over time would become less and less effective in combat. Now, this is a very large buff to the trait. We will be keeping a very close eye on this. But with this buff, Star Guardian should feel a bit more like it was always intended to. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yep.
All right, last big one to talk about. And I think this one, I think a lot of people are going to be surprised that it wasn't removed. But let's talk about the Mech. So the Mech has been an interesting one, but I don't think we quite lived up to the fantasy we always wanted to do with Mech. So Witty, why don't you tell them about what you were trying to do with Mech Pilot?
So we're still looking at Mech and why we're continuing it forward into this second half of Galaxies of let's let you have that 3 units combined into 1 super unit fantasy. That is obviously both difficult to balance and a little, new to TFT is, how exactly powerful what does a super unit mean when you're literally taking away 3 champions from the field? How powerful does that have to be as a trait? We've learned a lot over the last few patches, and so we're gonna make a pretty big mechanical change in order to try to help out the balance there. So I'll let you go into detail.
Yeah, so the big thing here is that because of what the Mech has been, we have kind of like an okay Mech and a bunch of really weak pilots, and we're going to change that. So what you're going to see here is everything is getting buffed, but with one big trade-off. And let's talk about that trade-off first. When the Mech pilots eject now, instead of coming out at full health, they come out at 35% health. So they are damaged. They are basically not that important to the fight anymore and will probably die very quickly, probably won't even cast their spell. So because of that, everything else is allowed to be much more powerful. So what you're going to see here is a very large health buff, a very large AD buff, an attack speed buff. We're pulling a little damage out of the cleave, though, because it was a bit too much free damage. A mana buff so that they can cast the spell. And this is probably one of the biggest ones, but the Mech now has 80 armor and 80 magic resist inherent to it. And this is big because it opens up itemization options. You don't feel like you have to have that Bramble Vest, have to have that Dragon's Claw. So hopefully there should be some more itemization choices with the Mech. And with this much power, who knows? Maybe we'll even see some things like attack damage Mech, other things like that. In addition to the Mech, we are changing the 3 pilots. So Annie gets a buff, small mana buff, big spell damage buff. So she's now a sorcerer that can hit pretty hard. And a spell shield buff. Now we had to be careful to not recreate PBE Annie where she could infinite cast. But she should feel like a very strong 2-cost Mech. Next up, we have Rumble. Rumble is basically, what'd you call it, our Shadow Fiend of the set now?
He's a real strong 3-cost champion.
Yeah, so if you want to run a Rumble in your comp, 900 HP, which is insane for a 3-cost, and that spell hits really hard now. So Rumble is a scary champion. And finally, Fizz gets an HP buff, an attack speed buff, a mana cost buff, and a spell damage buff. So all of the Mech pilots, because if you're not running them as a Mech, they're kind of down a trait, get to be a little bit stronger. And so we're hoping this change makes both the Mech and the Mech pilots a more interesting trait to do. And in addition, because of the extra champions in the bag, you probably won't see as many 3-cost Mech pilots. So we are balancing it around sort of like the level 6 Mech, level 7 Mech at most. So yeah, that should be a pretty cool change to the Mech. Okay, next up we have a few other champion changes. Not a lot, but a few small ones we want to talk about. First up is Ashe. Ashe has been in a weird spot where she's not a carry. Chrono Ashe never really took off. In addition, she also misses a lot with her arrows, kind of a pain in the ass. So what we're doing is we're going to let her get into that Shojin state a little quicker. So she gets a mana cost buff. But because of that, she was doing a bit too much damage, so she does get a spell damage nerf. And then the big one is the missile speed increase. The missile speed goes up quite a bit, so she should more accurately hit much more often.
Yep, this is just really embracing Ash. She's your utility sniper. You know, she rounds out that composition, especially now that there's 5 of those. You know, you need something with a little bit of CC and no way to lock them down. So some consistency, some rebalancing there. I'm really excited about this.
Cool. Next up is Ezreal. Witty, why don't you talk about Ezreal since you had some pretty strong fields here?
Yeah, Ezreal kind of has a similar relationship to Ashe, where, you know, we want more, but not all of our 3-cost champions are intended to be carries. And Ezreal was never really focused on his damage output, even though he did a pretty good chunk. He was more focused on that suppression of mana. So we're really leaning into that. You know, the way he suppresses mana is the same, but with a cheaper cost, more frequent casting. He's going to be locking down parts of their team and doing less damage while he's doing it. So a lot of good supplementing in Chrono and Blaster. And yeah, he's going to be comparable to something like the Mana Reaver bonus. He's taking up an entire unit slot in order to have this utility output. So I don't know, maybe we'll even see if you go to level 9 and you can't access Mana Reaver, but you can throw in your Ezreal to slow down their, you know, 175 mana cost Gangplank or whatever or the Mech, the expensive Mech, whatever the most expensive spell is at the time. Think about that as an option.
Yeah. So what we're seeing here is Ezreal damage goes down to very little. Attack speed goes up a little, but the mana cost here is big. And the thing to note here is, like, you throw a Seraphs on Ezreal, he instacasts. And that's big. Yep. So, all right, next up is Syndra. With the Star Guardian change here, what we're seeing is, and there's another change which we'll talk about in a bit, but her mana cost is getting set to 60, so a very slight mana buff. Her damage at 2 and 3 star is going down, but here's the real change. Now, if her orbs would kill the target, they will instead go to the next target. So she will not waste damage anymore. She will be able to shoot a thing, kill it, and move on to the next, and even kill 2 or 3 things in the same shot later.
Yeah, she's still this big ramping threat. You still generally want to get her to cast a lot, and should still be a good answer to really tanky units. But if those stars don't align, and we want to continue to support her as really one of the premier carries in Star Guardian, then she has other ways to have her damage spill over and carry a fight. Do the majority of your damage.
Yeah, so she should be a good 3-cost carry. Lastly is Shaco, who kind of gets a compensation buff we'll talk about a little later. But TLDR, Shaco gets to do a little bit more damage. We want him just being a little bit more threatening, so there's a boost to his spell damage. Yep. All right, 4-cost, Jhin. Jhin, these are actually very small changes, but in Jin's case, we want 3-star Jhin to be scary. And right now, he definitely hits hard, but his locked attack speed is kind of limiting him to what he can do. So what we've done is we've actually, for the first time, Jin's attack speed scales with star level. So slight nerf to 1, slight buff to 2, but if you hit that 3-star Jhin, he shoots fast. So this should make Jhin very scary.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Jhin is, we want to continue to embrace Jhin as a carry, and he's been a special kind of champion, right? That fixed attack speed really has some limiting factors, so trying to find a way to kind of let him improve more with star level, especially 3-cost. You better be real excited by a 3-cost Jhin.
Yep. And then lastly is Jinx. Jinx 3-star also has the same problem, and we're not fundamentally changing this problem. Jinx's weakness is she needs to get 2 kills or assists before she becomes a threat. That's not going to change. But when you do get that, we want that payoff to be big. And right now that payoff is like, okay. So we've made that payoff big. And we have doubled the rocket damage from live. So if you have a 3-star Jinx, and if you can get her those 2 kills and assists, she basically starts one-shotting everything. Okay, lastly is 5-cost changes here, and Witty touched on this a bit, but I want to touch on it as well. 5-cost should be the kind of thing that regardless of their traits, you see one in your shop at level 7 or level 8, and you go, I should consider this. Not necessarily because it's just a bunch of damage, but because it's an interesting way to supplement your comp. And to that end, I think there are two champions that haven't really hit the bar here. Echo and Aurelion Sol. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah.
So we've got some big changes coming for Echo and Aurelion Sol. First, let's talk about Aurelion Sol. To start with, he starts at full mana now, and when he launches, the first thing he does is he launches 4 fighters instead of 3. Now, subsequent launches are only 2 fighters, but basically he doesn't need as much time to ramp up. The damage has gone down, but here's the kicker. His fighters now drain mana. So Aurelion Sol is a great champion in any comp when you're like, I need to stop some key spell casts. Witty, any thoughts here?
Yeah, so I mean, this should be something that is a flexible option. You know, if you have some fights that are playing out very similarly, right? There's that you know, Poppy at the end of the fight that you just can't stop from casting, or some way that you need to really just disrupt the consistency of their casting. Aurelion Sol's an option for you. It should still be a strong damage option if you can supplement him with items or with Rebel buff, but adding a little bit of that situational utility to help him out.
Yeah, we've seen in our playtest that Aurelion Sol stopping that Gangplank from casting can be really big and really impactful. All right, and then Echo. So Echo kind of similarly got a bit of a redesign here. He gets a mana buff, so he's allowed to cast quicker because 100 mana is a long time. And this is something we're going to keep an eye on. His bonus spell damage goes down quite a bit, but there are 2 big changes. First off, he no longer hits every enemy 1 time. Instead, he hits a set number of times. Now this is key if, like, let's say they're down to 2 champions. Well, then he's going to hit those 2 champions quite a few times and actually be able to hit a lot of damage in the ways you need it. In addition, he always targets, when he can, the champions with the highest attack speed, because his new thing is that any enemy he hits, he gives them the Frozen Heart effect and slows their attack speed by 50% for 7 seconds. So this is pretty big.
Yeah, again, one of those options that you consider if you have a really heavy auto-attacking team that you need to deal with. He should still be, you know, reasonable damage threat. Give him that cybernetic and that infiltrator. Give him some AP items, and he's doing some good damage. Especially, I love the new kind of casting paradigm. Instead of hitting everyone once, you're gonna have some spicy moments where Echo's gonna be your clutch save at the end of the fight and hit that last unit, you know, 5 times. It's exciting.
Yeah, to be honest, I think it might be a little overpowered, but we'll see how it goes. Give it a try on PBE. All right, next up is a big one. We got some item changes. All right, so first up, Jeweled Gauntlet. Pretty simple. Same thing before, but now it also gives 20% critical strike damage. So Jeweled Gauntlet just gets a buff, straight up. Next up is Infinity Edge. Infinity Edge no longer gives 100% critical strike damage. Instead, only gives 20. So a pretty big nerf there. But Infinity Edge now says your crit rate is 100%. So if you put an Infinity Edge, every attack is critting. And if you do Infinity Edge Jeweled Gauntlet, every spell is critting.
Yeah, this should be exciting. It kind of changes some of the, like, really hyper multiplicative triple Infinity Edge interactions, and instead both gives more flexibility but more options how you can plug Infinity Edge into other item or champion situations.
Yep. And this is one of the reasons why Shaco got that compensation buff. Infinity Edge on Shaco, not as great anymore because the spell was already a guaranteed crit. But yeah, so this means, yeah, stacking Infinity Edge is probably not a good idea. You still can if you want that extra 20% critical strike damage, I guess. But next up, RFC. This is a change I think anyone who's been playing in Set 1 will remember, but it has regained your basic attacks can't miss. Any thoughts?
Yeah, we're still looking into kind of the total relationship of dodge and I'll flag missing as well here. This includes Graves' smoke bomb, but how that should relate to play and counterplay. We had some, you know, conversations around this with Yordles, but at least for now it's very clear. Dodging is something that is a one-way street in Galaxies. There's a bunch of ways to make your units dodge, make the enemy units miss, and there's no answer. And so we wanted to add an answer in a familiar place and something we're looking at having a healthier relationship with going forward.
Yep. Okay, last two are really small here on this page. Luden's Echo, we're getting rid of the star scaling, and it'll just be a flat number. Luden's has kind of struggled to find its place, but I will say with both Riven and Cassiopeia, as well as Ziggs and other champions, I think this item will see some new life, so we'll see how that goes. And then lastly, Hextech Gunblade. This one's a little weird, but what we're doing is we're removing the Omni Vamp and actually having it be hyper-focused on Spell Vamp. So it gets a buff to 35%, same as Bloodthirster, but it now only works on spells. So you have to differentiate this a little bit. Okay, so now let's talk about some bigger item changes, and I think this will make a few people happy. First off, Warmogs. Warmogs is no longer health regen. It now just says plus 1,000 health.
Yeah, get that big old ball of health. This is very good in the early game. This is an item you slam, and this is something you consider as well on units that can either synergize with extra percent health like Malphite, or a lot of resistances to beef up that tankiness, like the Mech is probably much better with Warmog. So it's simple, but I think there are a lot of decisions and options that'll go into how you use your Warmogs.
I've been liking Warmog's Gangplank, where it's just like, instead of having to do GA, you can do this, and he'll probably cast. Speaking of high health totals, though, Giant Slayer gets a very big change here. And this is probably one of my favorite. I admit bias, because, you know. But, so what Giant Slayer now does is it says all of your bonus, you gain an additional 20% bonus true damage. But if you're hitting an enemy who has more than 1,500 max HP, that instead is 80%. Now, the true damage here is post-calculation, so it's not like it's doing anything extra here. But the general idea of this item is, if you're fighting something small, this item doesn't do a whole lot. If you're fighting something big, like a 3-star champion, or a mech, or a high health, you do a lot. This item is great. So it's really hopefully living up to its name, Giant Slayer. And it affects spellcast, so like, you could put this on a Syndra, and that's okay.
Yeah, I'm excited for this to serve as a clearer counter option. We've kind of continued to develop our understanding of how to use percent max health damage, and I think this is going to be an exciting item to really consider how and when you're going to build it versus just the premier damage option given exactly how its numbers are tuned on a particular patch.
Yeah, I think also with like on live right now, we're seeing a lot of 3-star units, and pretty much every 3-star unit has more than 1,500 health. So if that's the meta, build Giant Slayer, and you're just gonna wreck them. So, and then last things for items, we have 3 items that are being removed. First off, we are removing Seraph's Embrace. Now this one's a little painful, but bear with us, because it's being replaced by an item called Blue Buff, and Blue Buff basically does almost the same thing, with a slight difference, which it says, after casting a spell, set your mana to 20, which basically means if you have 2 blue buffs, you still have 20 mana. So TLDR, it's basically a unique item. This, go ahead.
I was gonna say, we love, you know, repeat casting in Teamfight Tactics. That's one of the best fantasies. And we like shaping champions to do that with extremely low mana costs, and we're doing more of that in this set. We don't just want to always, if people are able to use, you know, 2 and 3 Seraphs, say, I guess we got to increase this unit's mana cost. So hopefully this has a better long-term relationship to us, letting people live that repeat casting fantasy and not be super dependent on the item system to do it.
Yeah, I think we'll all look back fondly on our triple Seraph Soraka from Rise of the Elements, or triple Seraph's Darius from Galaxies. But sadly, this was something we had to do for the health of the game. Next up, Chalice of Harmony was an item that was basically either borderline useless or, in the right circumstances, ridiculously overpowered. So we're removing Chalice of Harmony for a new item called Chalice of Power. And it's a pretty straightforward item. It works very much like Zeke's, where you, the person to your left, and the person to your right get 30 AP. So this gives you a non-AP component item that allows you to buff up AP on the champions nearby. And since every champion scales with AP now, you can do some pretty cool stuff with this.
Yep, I love finding ways to give that AP buff to different people. You know, I think there's a little positioning interest goes a long way, so I think this will be an exciting item.
Yep, and then lastly, this one shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, but Demolitionist Charge is gone, so there are no more Demolitionist Spatula. We are instead replacing it with Battlecast Armor, which turns your champion into a Battlecast.
Yeah, I'm excited to see different Battlecast units. spatulas, you know, we want a good mix of, there's a lot of fun and interest in what you do if you get it, who you put it on. Demolitionist was just causing some fundamental problems around some relationship with other champions, so this seemed like a great opportunity. Honestly, I would have wanted a Battlecast spatula even if we weren't having a separate issue, and this just represented a great opportunity.
Sweet. And then lastly, we have a few system changes we want to talk about. First off, on the 3-cost bag sizes, we're upping it from 16 of each champ to 18 of each champ. And this is so that if somebody else 3-stars their 3-cost, you don't feel like it's hopeless and you can't do it yourself. It'll be hard still, but it will not be hopeless. So next up is a long-requested change, and this might not meet everyone's needs, but this should be an improvement. Kane will no longer drop a spatula item if you have 0 of the trait on the board. So what this means is if you're running Cybernetic, you can still drop a Blade Master spatula, but you can't drop a Star Guardian spatula. So this should prevent the worst cases, but also leave you to go, maybe I should consider that 3rd Blade Master from here.
Yeah, especially late in the game, it became pretty clear that we want these items when they drop to be interesting. We want you to be like, oh, I have to consider a decision and an option that I hadn't before. When you had 0 of the trait, it wasn't really a decision. You were too far away. You couldn't make that much of a change to your composition. But if you're close and there's something you can do to either finish it out or you know, now you're 2 of 2 and you are trying to decide what unit to put that spatula on, I think it's in a much richer place in terms of options.
Yep. And then Nico's Help. This is a big one, but now Nico's Help always works, even if there are no more copies in the bag, which means if you have 8 Aurelian Souls and the other person has 2, you can still Nico it and still get it. What happens is the extra champ is generated, and then when it is sold, it does not go back into the bag. But this will mean no more of that feeling like the game is bugged, and it's like Nico will work as you expect.
Yep, and let's just be super clear. This still means, except when the pool is empty, it's pulling from the pool. You can still count and scout and rely on all those things. Just if you're empty, now we give you that little extra unit gets created. So should be good kind of user friendliness change.
Yeah, it'll make counter drafting a little weaker, but if you see somebody going for that 3-star 4-cost, you can start buying those units earlier. And if you can get them to 7, then they might not be able to Nico for that 8th and 9th. So next up, we have some drop chance changes. Now I want to talk about these because I'll be honest, these numbers are probably not what we're going to ship with, but we want to keep an eye on these. We are adding 1 more champ of each cost to the pool. And so because of that, hitting your 3 stars and even 2 stars is a lot harder. We saw this in Rise of the Elements, and we're seeing this in our internal playtests as well. And so we're going back to buffing the things to 40% on PBE to try this out, because we still want 3 stars to happen. We just need to get that right level of consistency. Right now on live, especially with 1 cost, it's a little too consistent, but in our playtests, it was basically never happening. So we'll be keeping a very close eye on these numbers and tuning them appropriately to try to make sure with the new 57 champion pool size. Okay, and then this is a big one here. Witty, ready to talk about this one? The sellback penalty. Now, when you sell a champion, you always get the full value back. So what this means is, for example, if you sell a 2-star 3-cost, then you are now at a... you can get the full 9 gold back. So, and then Galaxies. There are no new Galaxies this patch. We're going to focus on all the new content, and then starting in patch 10.13, we will add a galaxy and remove a galaxy. And so starting with 10.12, we're removing Lilac Galaxy. So Lilac Galaxy will be the first one we remove. So that's going to do it. Good timing. Witty actually dropped the call behind the scenes. So thank you for joining us. Hopefully you look forward to playing this. And remember, this is the PBE rundown. We will probably change a lot of this as we get feedback from you guys. So take a look, enjoy it, give us your feedback, and we hope you look forward to playing on PBE and patch 10.12 when it releases on June 10th. Thanks, everybody. Take it easy.